Hey guys, today's episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast is presented by the Sports Spectrum magazine. I think the magazine is maybe the best thing we do here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. We have a quarterly magazine, 4 issues every single quarter. We had Monty Williams from the Phoenix Suns on the cover of our last issue. We had Dabo Sweeney on the cover back in the fall for our football preview. And coming up in the spring, just a couple of weeks away here, we have Adam Wainwright and his wife, Jenny. Adam, of course, from the St. Louis Cardinals, will be on the cover of our spring edition of Sports Spectrum's magazine. You do not want to miss that story. And so you can order Sports Spectrum's magazine right now, and it's super cheap, $18 for a 1-year subscription or $30, an even better deal, for a 2-year subscription. And you can order right now at sportsspectrum.com. Just click the magazine icon at the top of the website and you are good to go. Put your credit card information in and you are subscribed. And I think it makes a great gift for someone. Maybe you get a couple issues. Maybe you go through it with your kids. There's devotionals in there, amazing stories. So consider the Sports Spectrum magazine, our quarterly magazine. That is actually what this ministry was founded on. The pillar of Sports Spectrum, going all the way back to 1985, comes from the magazine that was founded then, and it's still going strong today. Order your copy of Sports Spectrum's magazine. Get a 1-year or a 2-year subscription over at sportsspectrum.com.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am Jason. This is the Sports Spectrum podcast, and we're so glad that you tuned in to the show today. We are the intersection of sports and faith, and if you'd like to reach me directly, you can email me, jason@sportsspectrum.com. That is my email, jason@sportsspectrum.com. If you have a guest idea, a show topic, some feedback on today's interview with Jason Roy, or maybe you have a connection to someone that we should be talking to right here on the podcast, you can reach me directly, jason@sportsspectrum.com. And of course, our website, where all of our content can be found for free, sportsspectrum.com. Devotionals, articles, stories, podcasts, you name it, it's all available. And it's a great place to go to every single day at sportsspectrum.com. Today on the show, I'm really excited about this one. Jason Roy is our guest. He's the lead singer and founder of the band Building 429. And if you like Christian music and you're a fan of Mercy Me or Matthew West or Toby Mac, maybe Building 429 is on that list as well. I know they are for me. And Jason has been a part of this band now for, over 20 years. Started the band back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Their first radio single, and he'll tell a great story about this first single in the podcast, came out in 2003 with a song called Glory Defined. And he's had 4 number 1 songs, including that mentioned Glory Defined, as well as Listen to the Sound, which is one of my favorites, Where I Belong, and We Won't Be Shaken. At the 56th Annual Grammy Awards, their song We Won't Be Shaken was nominated for Best Contemporary Christian Music Album. It's actually their album, not their song. Best Contemporary Christian Music Album for a Grammy. How cool is that? And they had the longest running number 1 song in Billboard charts history at 16 weeks with that song, Where I Belong. They've sold over 500,000 records worldwide since 2004 with Building 429. Their latest album is called Live the Journey, and it's out now, released back in October of 2019. And they got a new single out called Don't Worry, and you can hear that everywhere music is found. And Jason Roy, I wasn't sure of the sports connection here, but this conversation went in a few different places that I was not anticipating. And he's got some great stories. This is a guy who can hoop. He can play some basketball. In fact, he was on the AAU circuit playing with guys like Shane Battier, the longtime NBA player, and of course, the Duke All-American. He's got some fun stories about his music being played for some very, some heavy hitters, we'll say, in the Major League Baseball world, and having a Building 429 song being played as a walk-up song, which to me is like the coolest thing. If you go to a baseball game and a guy like Albert Pujols is coming up to bat and your song is being played for his walk-up music, that's pretty awesome. So we talked to Jason Roy about all of that from Building 429. He joins us right now on Sports Spectrum. Jason Roy, welcome to Sports Spectrum, buddy. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. We've had many musicians on. You're not the first. We've had tons of guys from Skillet to Mercy Me to just many different bands that have been on. Building 429 is one of my favorite bands to listen to. And when I found out that we were going to get connected, I was like, man, we got to get Jason on. So it's great to have you here, brother.
Yeah, man. Well, you just named a bunch of my friends, man. That's awesome. Music, and it's interesting. Music and sports. I think we were talking about it a little bit just briefly, but music and sports, they're so combined and so, at the hip. And I've obviously have always been a huge sports fan, and that carries on out to today. But obviously, with the world that I've lived in, music and all that kind of stuff, it's sure is fun to be. Music brings us closer to those things. So
it does.
It's been a cool thing for me through the years, for sure.
That's great. Yeah, I won't name drop now on the people from the music world. I'll tell you after, and we can all the mutual friends that we probably have in this world. But you mentioned sports, so let's start there. When I asked you on a text about your love of sports, kind of your interest in sports, you said, "Listen, you're a huge basketball player for years," and I was thinking, all right, I don't think he's a pro player because he's in the band. No. He's in a band, but I bet you he plays kind of pickup and things like that. What's your where did that love for basketball come from, and what's your level of playing maybe nowadays?
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a great question. I grew up. My father was a semi-pro power lifter, and actually at one point he had the state title in Texas, right? So
wow.
So he's this big monster man, and athletics was just, a huge part of who we were. Over time, I ended up in North Carolina, and I happened to be in North Carolina in middle school, right in the middle of the big Duke run, like the first big Duke run, the Leitner, Hurley, the
early 90s. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, man, just, we happen to be a Duke family, which I know is really weird, but we happen to be a Duke family because there you were either NC State or Carolina. And then there was these small, tiny fragments of Duke fans, so everybody hated me.
Well, they're like the team that you love to hate in college basketball, right? You either love them or you hate them. There's no in between with Duke.
They so are. And of course I was in Wilmington, North Carolina, like Michael Jordan's hometown. Right. Yeah. So that's where I lived. And I went to the rival, later ended up going to the rival high school in Laney, where he went to school. And he's a Carolina guy, but at the time, I don't know how I didn't have a problem with it, but I was the biggest Jordan fan for the Bulls and the biggest Duke fan in middle school. And what was interesting is I remember that to us, obviously the national championship was a big deal, right? But it wasn't quite as big a deal to us as our ACC tournament. That was the biggest thing. It was like beat Carolina, beat NC State, beat Wake Forest, the old guard too, before they brought new teams in, and so I remember we had huge parties where 30 people would be at the house watching the game and all day watching the games, So anyway, that's where basketball got a hold of me. Yeah. And then I ended up moving back to Texas. And when I got to Texas, my dad was this power lifter guy. And I was like, yeah, well, probably not going to be able to be the strongest man in Texas. Maybe I'll find a different path. Basketball was my love. And I just dove headfirst into it and ended up having a lot of fun in high school and having a whole lot, playing with some really great players. And then as is always the case, you get better after high school, right?
Yes, I was one of those guys, Jay. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you get a lot better after high school. And man, I had a couple of colleges that were interested and offered me something, but they weren't where I wanted to go. And I had this in my head that I was going to go to a different school and walk on. But my life just kind of, when I got to school, just went into a big old mess, which is a part of the reason why music's a part of my life today and hope and all that kind of stuff, And so basketball just kind of didn't happen. But I kept on playing constantly, big pickup games all over the place. And one of my favorite things to do, this is part of who I am. My favorite thing to do is to be the long-haired white boy that nobody saw coming, and I go to pick up games and pick out the biggest, baddest guy and just demolish him. Cause I was in great shape and I could really jump and play. But true to form, I picked the wrong guy one day and I woke up in an ambulance. My face had been shattered and I didn't even know my name. I sat in a hospital for 6 hours with my face broken. And then the doctor came in and they finally figured out who I was. And they said, well, if you'd been hit a little to the left or the right, you wouldn't be here. So maybe you should make your life count for something. And I was like, okay, basketball is, not it. I had 6 weeks where my face was disfigured, and then they took me back in and rebroke everything and put it back together. Oh. Don't worry, I look the same. I look like I did before.
That's good. That's good.
But that was the time frame when I decided music or die. I'm going to go share hope. And here I am.
Wow. How old were you when that took place? Like early 20s time frame?
Yeah. I was, believe it or not, I was actually in school at NC State, the school that I hated. Electrical engineering was a major. NC State was that school, and I was not going to get into Duke, Yeah. It happened on the courts at the student center. Yeah.
Were you talking smack or something? I mean, is that how you were back then? And then he just looked at you and said, I'm going to take you out. What happened?
Yeah. All right. So I have scars under both eyes, and I mean, I've been split open in games. I literally played, one tournament because my backup wasn't available to play. But I had to wear a patch, and the doctor said, if you get hit, you're going to be split open for the rest of your life. And I was like, I don't care. I'm playing in high school, So then they put me on the block when I was younger, because I would, I could jump and I could get underneath people, and I was not afraid to throw down, Right. So I assumed when I woke up in the hospital, oh man, that was a bad elbow that I caught. But what I remember happening was I stole the ball from the guy, because he was point guard, I was point guard. Stole the ball, went down the sideline, then turned across the top of the key, passed the ball, and right when I passed across the key, lights out. And what I found out later, when the police showed up at my dorm, when I was just sitting there hurt, I was like, man, that sucks. This is bad. And the police showed up and they told me that he had run up behind me when I wasn't watching and just swung once.
Oh man.
Yeah. But it taught me a valuable lesson, man. It really did. I'd walked with the confidence and the swagger of the strongest man in Texas that I was not. Right. And you always think you're big and bad, you can handle it. And then you never think to yourself, but what if I don't see it coming? Right.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it changed my behavior quite a bit from that point forward.
Wow. I would say so. I mean, it would probably put me into retirement at 22 or whatever you were.
Yeah.
Never playing basketball again, but that didn't happen, I presume, right?
Oh, no. Basketball. No. I mean, I just realized that I had to be a little bit more quiet, a little bit less overt, and, and I still love it. I mean, it's funny. We did full tours where the meet and greet, instead of doing a meet and greet middle of the day, we would have them play a basketball tournament in that city. Their best team would play us. And it was crazy, man. It was like people would they'd hire referees and they'd do introductions and the stands would be full. And, I was by that time 25, 26, maybe 27. And we were doing these tours and it was awesome. So much fun.
Yeah, you kind of had to bring yourself down a little bit, though. If you got a crowd cheering you on playing basketball, not music, you're probably thinking, oh, so this is what it's like to be a professional athlete out there.
Yeah. And I had to remember too, that I'm a Christian artist. And, I don't care who you are. If you've ever played like real competitive sports, there's just times when it gets away from you. Mm-hmm. And so that was great for me, because it did teach me how to realize, hey man, you're a pastor on the church, on the floor. And there's a lot of people and there's a lot of trash talking, a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, what matters more than that score is your character, and, right. And that really helped a lot,
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. I was, we used to play a church basketball league here in Connecticut where I live. And I was in my early to mid 30s during this time playing. And I love to play like you. I think I got better as I got older and loved to play pickup and, but playing in leagues were fun too, because it was competitive and you wanted to win and you try to pick the best team. So we would play in these leagues, and it was the guys from the church who would play when their team wasn't playing. They would ref the games.
Okay.
And I probably was not the best representative of a Christ follower during my playing times either. I wasn't like cursing real bad, but I would get, vocal,
Yeah.
let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I would say to, these refs, these volunteers from the church, guys, open up your eyes and see that is a foul there. Make that call. And it got to a point one day when one of the refs just left the game, and he's like, I'm not dealing with this. And he left. And I realized I was probably, I hate to say this, probably about 10 years ago. I'm 48 now. And it just made me realize, oh, wait a minute. Even though it's a church basketball league, right? It's organized through the church. My witness isn't a really good one here. And, it was like this really hard, fine line, Jay, maybe you know this, of competitiveness, and then I don't know what the other word would be, maybe craziness, right? And you're just going over that line. I mean, I'm glad I'm not alone on that.
No, it's such a fine line. I mean, even in any sport, I mean, if I play pickup football, play baseball, play, any soccer, it doesn't matter. You want to win. I mean, look, I CrossFit every morning, and I have to be, hey, those squats are not all the way down. You're not doing it right, man. Like you're cheating, bro. And the coach is looking over like, hey, shut up, man. He's just trying to get a workout in. But I'm like, no, it's not right. So anyway, all that to say, yeah, I feel like I've grown a lot in that area. And now I just, more than anything, I think it, I just don't say it.
So I really want to go into that moment, Jay, when you were in the hospital and you kind of realized something happened, right? I'm guessing, I don't know your full testimony, and maybe you can kind of share that here, but this kind of moment, right? This pivot, if you will, from, maybe professional basketball player. I have no idea if that was going to be the case, but this moment where you wanted to kind of go into music and really do the kind of music that would honor and glorify God. Kind of take me through that decision a little bit.
Yeah. Well, as everybody does, I played the AAU tournaments all over the country. I played in LA, played Memphis, but everywhere, and I was selected to that team for Northeast Texas. And, it was cool. It's like all the all-stars from every district, all the biggest, baddest dudes were on that team. And it was a lot of fun. But when we talk about professional sports, one of the things I remember being at a tournament that Bobby Knight and Coach K were sitting in the stands watching us play.
Holy cow, right?
And yeah, totally. And they weren't watching me.
I understand.
But there was, I remember that tournament, Shane Battier was there. And I remember kind of watching and going, that's pro. Like, kind of
just a different level. Yeah.
Yeah. Just going, he's got all the skill set that I have, but he's 6'9", and he's got a 4.0 GPA. And it's like, I mean, this guy, he played on a team with everybody else was like 6 foot, 6'1", and he still brought the ball up the floor. He still shot, 24 foot for nothing, for fun, and would encourage the person that was guarding him. You're doing all right, kid. Hang in there, 2-0. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, all right, that's probably what pro is. So pro is probably not in my future, but I could still dominate on the small courts, and that made it fun for me. But, sitting in that hospital room, I've been kind of in my head thinking music was what I wanted to do, but I was the first grandchild that was going to go to college, and I had this like huge, my parents come from a small town background. You go to high school, you get your degree, and you get a job, and music was just like not possible. It just wasn't a possibility, so even my mother at one point, when this happened to me, this whole thing, and I came home, I was like, I'm going music. I'm going for it. I'm just going to throw everything. Cause I was already in a band, and we were already playing shows here and there. And we were selling out small little places, which was kind of cool. But I told Mom that, and Mom was like, you can play music, you can go to school, you can't do both. And if you choose music, you're going to need to pack up and leave, man. And she was trying to give me the tough love. Like, I see it now. Couldn't see it then, but I see it now that she's like, this kid needs to stay on a path. And, come on now, you're going to go out and play concerts with Stephen Curtis Chapman and with Toby Mac, and It's not going to happen. But what, thank God for athletics. All that did for me was like, oh yeah, watch me. And, let's see. And so I went all in, and I didn't even mean it towards my mom, because I had a lot of people in my life that were like, Jason, that's just not a reality, man. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And, it's miraculous that it did. But what I honestly, when I signed my first record deal, the A&R guy that was talking to me, like the thing that put it over the top for him was how much of an athlete I was, how much I hated losing. Like I was at a tour called Winter Jam 2 nights ago, and they had a ping pong table, and I had to throw down, like it's just who I am.
Yes.
Anyway, so that was a huge marker for the label to see this kid's going to do it, whether we help him or not. He's going for it. So why would we not come alongside that? So the moment that I decided, quite, literally was, kind of in that room, and when you're told, hey, you might need to make your life matter, because you probably might get lucky to still be here, kid. You have to make some decisions, and electrical engineering was really just to make my mom and stepfather proud. It wasn't what I wanted to do,
Yeah. Did you grow up like in a Christian home? Is that background, that faith element, always kind of there with you, or was that something that happened later as well?
Yeah. So growing up in Texas, my mom was the oldest of 5 sisters. My grandfather, he's kind of like he's amazing, man. He's like a musician, still plays music today. I mean, he's a great bass player, great guitar player, piano player, Southern gospel stuff,
Yeah.
And mom and all them, they all sing. And so we grew up in the church with my grandfather as the music pastor. But my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 5. Dad kind of went off the deep end, and mom, like, then she really locked down. She saw my dad, what he did, and she was like, all right, we are going to be locked in as followers of Jesus. And I don't care if you like Southern Baptist or not, bro, that's what you're going to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've always had that background, and it's always been great for me, honestly. Like, my parents weren't perfect, but man, when my mom said to me, when you have hard times and you don't know what to do, run to the church and run to Jesus. Like, those words have just been a part of who I am my entire life. And every time when things have fallen apart, because they do, I've been pretty faithful to run to the church and go help,
Oh, that's good. Well, there's a difference between doing that, but really, when you see music that starts to affect a lot of people and your songs are being heard by a lot of people, there's this elevated platform, maybe that nobody ever thinks they're going to get to. But it happens, right? And God does what he does. And all of a sudden you're, at concerts with Stephen Curtis Chapman, and you're selling, amazing amounts of music, and people are hearing it, and it's on the radio. What was that like, kind of, I guess you could take us through the early parts of forming the band as well, but just when suddenly that platform is elevated, right? And you realize, wait a minute, there's a lot of people that are hearing the songs that we're writing, the songs that we're performing. That's what I guess every musician would aspire to, you would think. Just kind of every athlete would aspire to make it to the pro level or whatever it is someday.
Right.
But then it happens. What was that like for you, kind of going through that process when it just started to kind of take shape?
Well, I have a lot of empathy for people who, have their greatest dreams happen and then kind of go crazy. You watch Justin Bieber's thing, and you see him, he's kind of seemed to grab it and pull it back together. But, I watched him, and I get it. I understand why he's acting that way.
Right.
But I know that, like, for me, there's 2 things I was not ready for. Number one, I didn't realize that I was going to be the pastor of a church. I did not know that. I didn't understand that people weren't going to come to me and go, wow, that guitar riff is awesome. Or, wow, what a cool song. They were going to come to me and say, my daughter overdosed last night and she doesn't believe there's a God. What do I tell her? Right. Like, I was not ready for that. I remember the first few times that came, I was just like, I kind of love God and I play music, like, I just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
That was one thing I wasn't ready for. And the other thing I wasn't ready for was I was small town, and I loved playing music, and I loved being in churches and seeing people worship God. I had no idea that I was going to be running a business, like,
right.
A very large and complicated business that can go upside down quick if you're not watching every detail. So those 2 things caught me off guard. our first go round. And I think that, we were out on tour with like Casting Crowns, and on the Life Song tour, which was a huge tour, arenas sold out. We're playing these huge stages, and it looks like we're just absolutely killing it. And people don't understand that the opening artist is likely getting paid $500 to stand on an arena stage and play a show. And so there's also that. It's like, you look like you're wealthy, you look like you've made a lot of money, but you can't even go to Starbucks to get a coffee without like checking the checkbook and making sure that you can do that,
Yeah.
So those things early in our career showed up in me in sometimes negative ways. Sometimes I would be irritated by the situation and not aware that, a person's one, "Hey, Jason, how are you?" is the only moment they get to spend with you. And like that moment matters to them. And you have got to just suck it up and be who, put on the Pastor Roy thing. And it took me a long time to figure that out. In fact, I'd say it took probably through our first record deal. I still didn't have it quite figured out. We made 3 records with them, and I never really quite wrapped my brain around that. But then I think when we turned the corner and signed our second record deal was when I kind of started going a little bit deeper and started realizing, oh man, I'm not making music, I'm making hope. And I need to be ready for the people that are gravitating to hope, because they're coming, a lot of people are coming from a place of despair, and I've just got to be deeper and more ready for that.
Isn't that something that, and you are a pastor, obviously, in that sense, but whenever I've talked to musicians, especially those who are in the faith space or kind of hope dealers, as you just described, in terms of what they want their music to be, which is to provide people with hope and ultimately point back to Jesus, the lead singer, the person that's sort of the face of the band, if you will, becomes almost a de facto pastor, right? Or a de facto counselor, because people are listening to your songs. I think about a couple of your songs, Listen to the Sound, Where I Belong, We Won't Be Shaken. And I hear those songs, and then it takes me back to a place where maybe I was struggling, or maybe I'm still in the midst of struggling, and I hear your song, but then I go to you, if I ever met you, and said, Jason, I'm struggling right now. Thanks for that song. Can you help me? I have to imagine, especially in those meet and greets, right? And so what was that like? I mean, as your music started to become bigger and bigger, because you were in that space anyways, but maybe some of your colleagues and you have had this conversation about, making that music, but the responsibility that kind of comes once you put that music out and people hear it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's a massive responsibility that comes. I mean, writing the song is generally I'm not saying writing a song is easy, because it's very difficult to write something that matters that much. That's 3.5 minutes that's going to be heard around the world. Like, that's very difficult, but it's very cathartic. It's like, like you're just sharing your story of like who God has been to you in those moments. But, in this world of, mental health, and in this world of, especially the people that we draw to our concerts, a lot of people that don't have good families, don't have people around them that love them, and they bring massive subject matters and they place it in front of you. And I think that over time, what I finally kind of realized is that, almost like, if you think about it, what do you say to somebody whose mom just passed away? What do you say?
Right.
Yeah. What do you do? Well, you hug them. You say, I'm here for you, and you pray for them, and you just pray that God will move somehow in that moment. Right. But, young Jason's trying to figure out what's the right thing. How do I say the right thing here? I don't know what to do. I don't know. And, I probably made a mess out of some of those situations, but as time went on, I became, like I said, more pastoral, more aware of the situation. I was on staff at a church as a worship pastor for 7 years while doing it. And that made a massive difference to my life, walking out real things, real issues with real people at my church for alongside. And what I found was that what I did on the road gave me incredible insight, and I could bring that back to the church and our worship team and our whole church, and help, even just like the whole process of how we do things at the church. I could challenge that and help them see, hey, we could do this a more efficient way, because, I go to these churches 150 days a year, like I've been to all of them. But then what I was doing at the church filled me up and gave me empathy and courage to step into tough situations when I went back out on the road. And so that was a huge part of my life. So that's why I'm so thankful for the church, even though sometimes I get really irritated with the church. I'm so thankful for it, you know?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. It's because, without the church, where would we be? But at the same time, we're all flawed humans, and unfortunately, flawed humans, do some things that don't represent each other well. But yeah, I'm so thankful for that as well. I wanted to ask you and I remember asking, I think it was Bart Miller, this question. Do you remember the first time that you heard one of your songs on the radio, and you're kind of cruising through, or all of a sudden you were like, hey, yeah, I know that guy. I know that song. That's the song. Do you have a moment like that?
Yeah, I have a huge moment like that. We signed our first deal, and they wrote a song called Glory Defined. And this, we recorded it, and sent it to radio. And then, have you ever seen the movie That Thing You Do? It's a Tom Hanks movie. Okay. It's one of my favorite. It's a great depiction of what it's really kind of like on the road. So if you ever want to know what it's like being like growing up and music, watch that movie. They nailed it. But, they hear their song on the radio for the first time. It's very much like what it was for us. We found out that the Glory Defined was going to play on a radio station in Nashville at 12:06 a.m. for the first time. And we didn't even have a radio in our house, in our place. So I was like, don't worry, babe. I'm gonna start the car. My son, who's 18 now, was like 1, and I said, don't worry, I'm going to go start the car and we'll just go out there and listen to it. Well, that night it snowed 2 feet in Nashville. It never happens. And so I didn't care. I still went out there. I'm like getting, snow out of the way, and I cranked the car up. And yeah, I took my wife and my son 12:06 a.m. and sat in the car and listened to it. And not proud of it, but cried because we had made it against all odds to having a song on the radio. Of course, you don't know at the time how much more work there is to do. That's why there's so many artists that come along and have huge radio success, and then they're like, well, where do they go? Like, it's because it's so hard afterwards, Yeah. But that song ended up being the fastest #1 in the history of Christian radio, and the first I heard it at 12:06 a.m. It's pretty cool.
That's a great story. And I got to tell you, as I'm, preparing for our interview, I just put on YouTube or Spotify, and I found some of your old songs because I hadn't listened to them in a while, the older ones. And I put Glory Defined on, and I became a Christian in 2001, or started my walk with Christ in 2001. So it was right around this time when I started to, I didn't even know there was like a thing called Christian music. As a kid who was very much not a Christian for many years. And I was introduced to Third Day. That was the first band. And we've had Mac on this show. And I remember listening to Third Day and thinking, my gosh, these guys sound really good. And then I started, looking for more music and finding more bands to listen to. And you guys and Glory Defined was one of those songs, I would say, early on that I listened to. And I was like, it's about the message of the song, but it's like really good music too. And I think, anything that you put a label on, like Christian athlete, Christian music, Christian movie, you want it to be good, right? You don't just want to do that and have it kind of, even the show, I put a label on this show. Hey, this is a Sports Spectrum show. We're a sports show, but we bring faith, we bring Jesus into the conversation. But I want it to be good. I don't want it to be cheesy just because we're doing like something called sports and faith. I want it to be actually good. I have to imagine, knowing the competitor that you've just described yourself as, that's kind of where you guys fall into the play too.
Absolutely. I mean, like we spend so much time trying to make sure that whatever we're doing is just the hours upon hours to just, and you the same way, listening to detail and going, I wrote 100 songs, but really only 20 of them are maybe great, 10 are really good.
Right.
So throwing away hours of work, whittling down to, and I just always I feel like writing songs a lot like footwork on a basketball court, right? It's like, nobody thinks to work footwork, right? But the greatest do. And because of that, they have so many more tools in their bag, right? And so songwriting is just, no one's in the gym. It's just you work the foundation, and so, and that's what it's kind of been like for us. And yeah, it has to be great. It doesn't honor the Lord for us to slap Christian on something and it be terrible. It just doesn't honor the Lord.
Completely agree. I was thinking about the connection with sports. I love how you've kind of done that through our conversation. What is a time, or maybe there's multiple names that you can drop here? I'm asking you to name drop. It's okay if you want to. You don't have to name names, but has there been that moment when a couple of the athletes that you admire, or coaches, or people in sports, and you're like, wait a minute, you're fans of our music? You actually listen to what we put out?
Yeah.
I always think that that's such a cool experience when you have that connection with an athlete and you find out that they're quote unquote fans of your music. Have you had a moment like that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's been quite a few. I mean, a couple that come to mind. Albert Pujols going to the plate with one of our songs playing is just about the coolest thing ever.
I mean, right? That's amazing.
I mean, and once again, when you meet a guy like Albert and you shake his hand and his hand is literally twice as wide as yours, you're like, oh, that's what pro athlete looks like, you know?
Right. Yeah. He's a different kind of breed though, Jay. I think we know that.
Good Lord, that guy. And so nice. How can you be that good and that nice? I love it. But honestly, also the athletic director at UK, he's a huge fan of Building 429, Barnhart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we've been able to go up and sing national anthem at their games, and they give us great seats, and that's always really cool. But honestly, I was in Sports Illustrated one time because of a guy named Todd White. He was a closer for Detroit Tigers.
Sure. Yeah.
And he used one of our songs to go to the mound. And they did this article that was like, songs that, pitchers use. And there's a backstory to that that's so cool. If you have a second,
please tell the story.
We were playing Building 429. I was going out to play a show at a place called Del Mar, California, at a festival called Spirit West Coast. Just this massive festival. Now, the year before, we had played for the first time, and we were like, oh my gosh, we made it. We played the side stage at 10 a.m. and thought no one was going to be there, and 4,000 people showed up, and we were like, oh my, here we go. Like, this is it.
Right.
And then the next goal is to play the main stage. Like, that's the next goal. Mm-hmm. And the next year they booked us on main stage, and we were so excited about it. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. But we went to a camp in North Carolina the week before, and it was burning hot outside, but I was still basketball. I didn't care. I played all day and I played all afternoon, and we just balled for like 5 days straight. And I played so much that I literally dehydrated myself and lost my voice, right? It was gone.
Oh, no.
Now I got to fly out to California from North Carolina to Del Mar and play a show. But the problem is I can't talk at all. And it's it's our main stage show I've always waited for. And so they took me the morning of the show. We wake up and my voice is not there. And they ran me to San Francisco to go to a voice doctor. And the voice doctor was like, I can give you a steroid shot, but that's all we can do. And you're okay. But so she gives me the steroid shot, and I'm warming up my voice in this rental car on the way back down. Actually, I take it back. It's not Del Mar. It's Monterey.
Nice.
To Spirit West Coast. And it just didn't, my voice didn't and I'm freaking out, and so they're setting up all my gear, and we get back 5 minutes before I'm supposed to go on stage. And I didn't even change clothes from when I woke up that morning. So they hand me my microphone, and my manager says, you can do this, go. And I just yelled like, yeah, what's up, Spirit? What's up, Spirit West Coast? And my voice came through, and I sang terribly, but I was so amped up that I just basically turned it into like a rock show,
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just everywhere. I was climbing rails out over the crowd and all this stuff. And it was like, it was 15,000 people. It was amazing. That's awesome. Well, the next morning I woke up in Monterey after this show, opened the door to our hotel, and there's a Monterey newspaper there. And I pick it up, and it's a picture of me standing on this rail, wearing a shirt that says, I love my wife. Well played,
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, good job. And I didn't think anything of it. It's like, oh, that's cool. Well, fast forward 3 or 4 months, and my buddy calls me, Jason, you got the new Sports Illustrated yet? I'm like, no, I don't. Go get it now. Why? Just go get it. Look at the center page. So I run to the Barnes and Noble. I open up Sports Illustrated, and it's all the pitchers who have their favorite song. And it's like, it's U2, it's Aerosmith, it's Seven Dust, it's all these amazing bands.
Metallica, right? Yeah.
There's only one picture though, one artist photo, and the artist photo is me walking on a rail in Monterey wearing "I Love My Wife" t-shirt. I made it into Sports Illustrated, and my wife stood beside me and got to see. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, God, wow.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I'm so glad my voice wasn't there that day, because if it had been, I wouldn't have been crazy. And number two, I wouldn't have worn that shirt ever. So I would have changed. So,
my gosh.
Great.
What a great story. And Todd, you said Todd White was the pitcher?
Yeah.
Did you and Todd eventually connect, or?
Yeah.
I thought so.
We ended up connecting. He was playing, I got to see him at a Royals game and a couple other little games here and there. And we just talked back and forth. He sent me a jersey, and,
That's cool.
I'm always trying to be respectful too. I mean, these guys are busy. They have lives, Mm-hmm. So Albert, every once when Albert would hit him, I'd text him like, "Oh no, you did it!" Wow, But I try to stay out, leave him some space. Kalina Azubuike too is a cool dude, and I played basketball with him a couple of times.
Yeah. So
yeah, cool guys here and there.
Yeah, it was funny because I don't know if you saw this when Ben Roethlisberger's last game was taking place, or it wasn't even the last game. It was when the Sunday night game was happening, and it was the Chargers and the Raiders, and the winner of that game goes to the playoffs. The loser, presumably, if there is a loser, goes home, and then the Steelers get in the playoffs.
Right.
And Bart Millard, who has been on the show, Bart is posting on Instagram, like the next day, I think he did, a phone call that he's on. It looked like it was him and Toby Mack and Ben Roethlisberger, and they're watching the game together, through FaceTime. And they have this moment where Roethlisberger puts on the Raiders helmet, which he would never do because he was rooting for the Raiders because he wanted to get in, because that game almost ended in a tie. But it just was really neat to watch, and made me think, that's why when I was talking to you, it made me think of the athlete, musician connection, because I'm guessing they met because Ben is a big fan of Toby Mack or of Mercy Me or whatever. And maybe of you guys too, but it just made me think the connection of the athletes. That was a really cool moment. I'm glad he shared it, because that's something he probably had to get permission to share, of course, but it was pretty neat to see that and just think, all right, that's a cool world. And I say the same thing, even though I'm a sports guy, like being able to spend time with some of the guys you watch on TV, your heroes, if you will, you're fans of. There's a neat part of this whole thing that we get to do in this world where we get that opportunity.
For sure. It's coming off the stage and walking down the stairs after playing an arena show, and like Albert being there, and
Right.
and it being like, like totally, high five, fist bump. Like, it's like, wait a minute, this is so close to what it's like when they walk back in after they hit a smash, a big double or big trip or home run or whatever. They walk back in. And that's what it felt like, that's what that feels like. And it's so cool that, music allows us to get close to these guys. And one of the things that comes to my mind too, by the way, is how most of these athletes, like the ones that I've met, obviously they're world-class people, but
Sure.
I just think, man, these guys have been given a lot, man. They've got a lot. They can do anything they want. They can do any time they want to do anything they want to do. And to see these guys be upright and like, stand up guys, that's a different level, I think, of character. Knowing that they can kind of do what they want, if, and most people would be like, yeah, well, pro football player, pro whatever. So when I meet these guys like Monty, and when I meet these guys, and I'm like, man, by the way, Monty's story is unbelievable. His whole
talking about Monty Williams for those listening.
Yeah.
Podcast. Yeah.
What a sweet guy he is.
Yeah.
Connected with him through the years as well. So all that to say, it's super cool that this world brings us together, for sure.
It is. It's such a cool thing. And I'm glad that we've been brought together for this podcast, Jay. My last question for you is kind of the what's next question, which you probably get a lot when you're talking, especially in music. I don't know why. It's like, I wrote 2 books, released a second book, And then people were like, what's the third book? And I'm like, I don't want to write any more books. Like, this was painful.
Right.
I don't want to do anything. This was hard. Why are we talking about a third book when I just went, and just dedicated 2 years of my life to write this thing? But you as musicians, you get this all the time. In fact, I even asked you before we started, is there a new album you're working on, a new single? What's next for Jason Roy? But you answer that question however you want. It doesn't even have to be music related, but what's next for you, where God has you right now? Where are you kind of thinking the Lord is kind of have you and maybe taking you to?
Well, I've got 20 years in building 429 now, and it's been a great 20 years. And for me, COVID has been the world stopping has had an effect, and
yes,
it redirected my attention towards writing and producing, which I've always loved. And, it's redirected my attention towards maybe my family, where I was gone 225 nights a year. I was home, and we didn't kill each other. Like, we actually liked each other, which helps. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I've got a lot of projects that I'm in the middle of developing. I'm constantly producing and writing new songs. Building has a new song coming out called "Don't Worry" that I'm just stoked out of my mind about. I'm just super excited about it. Right. And I don't know if you know this, but we started our own label about 3 years ago. And so everything that I produce now for Building 429 is not through another label. It's actually through our label, which has been really cool. Nice. Again, because all those business chops that I didn't have, I've been able to grow them through the years.
Sure.
I'm actually developing a musical right now with a couple of producing partners. There was a musical that came out last year called A Week Away that was like a Netflix thing. And it was like the first Christian kind of musical thing that had ever been done. And it basically revisited all the biggest songs of Christian history and put them in this song or in this movie. That was actually really good.
Is that like a camp? Was it with kids at a camp?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen it, but it pops up on my Netflix thing sometimes. So I'll have to check it out.
So that production team came to me, and I've started writing for a new musical, which I'm not allowed to talk a lot about because we're in the middle of funding it and everything, which is super cool. Sure. And be honest with you, my son's 18 and he's already on the road playing guitar, playing drums. My daughter's 15 and she has music that she's working on. So, where I used to be 100% focused on only one thing, right? I've just come to realize that I can actually, I now have the bandwidth to where I can focus on that and a lot of other things, and maybe just enjoy being home a little bit more. So that's where I'm at, and looking forward to continuing to have conversations with Building's fans and continue to write music.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so cool that your kids are kind of, for lack of a better word, following your footsteps, and what they're doing, probably carving out their own path, but still kind of doing something that dad does as well. So really neat there. Jason, thanks again for the time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being flexible enough to come on the show. And I know we moved some times around, and I just appreciate you being willing to do this interview and having the bandwidth to come on, as you said. Thanks for doing it, bro. I really appreciate it.
Hey man, thank you so much. Thanks for what you're doing. And hey, we'll reconnect again sometime. All right.
Yeah. Come up to Connecticut and do a show, and hopefully we'll hang out.
Not in the winter.
Not in the winter though. In the fall. Absolutely. Maybe we'll play some basketball too.
Hey, you have to be nice. All right. Take it easy.
I promise you, I'm a much different person now.
All right.
Thanks.
Sounds good, man. Take care, man.
And many thanks to Jason Roy from Building 429 for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. I'm a huge fan of him. His music I was already a huge fan of, but now just getting to know him, getting to talk to him, getting to hear his stories. And there were some really great stories there. How about playing basketball and you're in a hospital with a broken face, basically, and making a decision, you know what, I want to play music and I want to glorify God in that music. And then playing hoops on the AAU circuit. How about the walk-up music of Building 429 being played by Albert Pujols? How about hearing his song for the first time, Glory Defined, on the radio in a snowstorm in the car with his baby and his wife? Lots of great stories there from Jason Roy. To me, that's kind of the perfect podcast guest when I really think about it. When you have a guest come on your show, you want stories to be told. It's not just a Q&A. Of course, I have questions and I'm curious about things, but I would rather hear stories all day long. And Jason Roy brought the stories here to today's show, and we thank him. Again, the new single from Building 429 is called Don't Worry, and it's out now. You can actually listen to it everywhere music is found. I listen to music on Spotify, so I'm sure you can listen to it there as well. And their library goes back almost 20 years, and they got some great songs. Some of those, and I can tell you this in all honesty, I had forgotten about, and I went back and I was listening to some of their music, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Glory Define is a fantastic song. Listen to the Sound, Where I Belong, We Won't Be Shaken, all amazing songs. And it's funny when you remember the songs, you don't know if you necessarily remember the artists or what years that was. But Building 429 has a ton of great music, and highly suggest you go and check it all out. Again, thanks to Jason Roy for being here today on the show. Thank you as well for tuning in. We appreciate you. Make sure you tune in next time for another episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. Whatever app you're listening to this podcast on, a great way to stay in touch with all that we have going on here is to click that subscribe or that follow button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And again, our website is sportspectrum.com. We look forward to having you join us next time right here on the show. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and join us next time right here on Sports Spectrum.